Chapter 4, Coming Together. The MTM was coming together beautifully. The machine was being hidden by Grandpa's outhouse to keep prying eyes out of the children's business. The only problem was that Grandpa wanted to use his outhouse. James convinced him to use the nice indoor plumbing system until the kids had finished remodeling. And so they worked. Rosie helped James with the building and operation of the machine. Jeff helped by telling the two what they needed to do in order to take them into fairy tales, because you see, that is where they are trying to go, into a book. Abby collected costumes that matched the descriptions Jeff gave her. They had 2 tunics for the boys and 2 gowns for the girls. As soon as Abby brought the costumes over, Rosie squealed with delight. She actually squealed. The costumes were exquisite. The boys didn't really like their costumes. Jeff and James thought that they were too manly to wear those girly clothes. But the girls enjoyed swishing about the yard in their gowns. Abby's was gold and white with long sleeves and a full skirt. Rosie's dress was the same shape, but was blue and silver. Every day after school, the kids came over to James's house to work on the MTM. They loved spending all their free time working on the machine. I certainly wouldn't do that. I would probably just watch TV. But this isn't about me. It's about the MTT. That is what the 4 youths started to call themselves. MTT stood for Magic, even though it's not magic, Transport Team. Not the catchiest name I've ever heard before, but then again, it does cover the basics. They are a team. The machine does transport them, and it is magical, sort of, not really. So they kept the title of MTT, even if they might get made fun of if they ever told anyone. As I have stated before, I know nothing of science. I just don't. Some people don't know a thing about math or geography. I just am one of those people, but with science. So now that the machine is finished, I couldn't begin to tell you how it works. The magical, even though it's not magic, transport machine was really finished. It took forever, but it was finished. Well, it didn't really take forever. Otherwise, you'd be too dead to read about it. So it actually took a really, really, really long time to finish the MTM. Like 5 days. I could tell you how to use the machine, but I think I'll let James. I will show you how to use it, James said melodramatically. First, you enter the outhouse, or what appears to be an outhouse. The rest of the kids groaned. They knew that already. Then you place a book, any book, into the box over on this back wall, James said, pointing. The book's title will appear on the screen to the left of the box. It appears on the box. If it appears on the box to the right, then we have a problem. It will mean that this book has either been used too many times or that it has reached the end and you need to open it to the beginning. If the book comes to an end while someone is in the book, they'll be stuck in that world forever, or until I can figure out how to get them out. The others stared at James. No one wanted to be stuck in a book for the rest of their life. Don't worry, people. Nothing too bad happens to anyone, not even the villain. Oops, I forgot you don't know who the villain is yet. Never fear, readers. I will introduce her soon enough because she is dying to meet you. I'll let James continue for now. Don't worry, I won't let anyone get stuck in there. I can assure you that won't happen. Want to know why? Because I added a time limit for how long you can be in. You can just adjust that on this dial, James said smugly as he pointed to what looked like an oven timer attached to the wall. Moving on, the screen underneath the box with the book is where you select the chapter that you'd like to enter into. The screen had a blue frame and looked as if it had come off some sort of handheld gaming system. After that, you put on your costume and unlock this glass box that has a start button underneath. To the left of the bottom screen, there was a glass box with a keyhole on it. Under the box, the kids could clearly see a big red button. Why is it red? Rosie inquired skeptically. It's because I don't really know why it's red. I suppose it's because in every movie I've seen the important buttons are always red. James laughed, scratching his head. So why is it locked? Rosie questioned. So that no other human being can use it except us, James responded, puffed up with pride. Pride that soon got deflated. You forgot one thing, Einstein. We don't have keys, Abby put into the conversation rudely. James' eyes popped open in surprise. I forgot keys. Oh no, how will we work it? I'm such an idiot, cried the teen while burying his head in his hands. Jeff coughed. James, we didn't forget the keys. The 6 keys we had made are in your back pocket. I saw them when you bent over. James turned around and tried to nab the keys from his own pocket. He kept spinning around and finally keeled over. The keys flew into the air and landed in the toilet that James and Rosie had removed from the outhouse. Yuck! The 4 kids shrieked. They went over to the lavatory and bent to look into it. Now, before I write any more about the kids, I must explain something. Outhouses are usually just a hole in the ground with walls surrounding it. This outhouse was not, otherwise they certainly wouldn't have been able to take the toilet out. When Grandpa had ordered this outhouse, it was the latest in outhouse deals. This baby had a toilet inside that was very deep. I won't go into these disgusting details for sake of your stomach. I will tell you that the kids definitely did not want to reach their hand into the deep toilet. This is not abnormal of them. I wouldn't want to either. So instead of plunging their nice clean hands into the wet, slimy filth, they got Freddie to do it. I know. Who is Freddie? Alfred is his real name, and he is James' younger brother. Freddie was more than willing to stick his hand in the gunk when James said that Alfred would get paid $1 for finding the keys and washing them off. Freddie probably would have done it without getting paid. He was just one of those nasty little boys who love to get dirty. I say yuck to them. As soon as Freddie had produced the keys, his mother called him inside for a snack. Sorry, Jamie, I need a snack, the 6-year-old said, dropping the keys back into the toilet. The 4 older kids gasped and stared, for everyone knew that Freddie had nap time right after snack and would not be back to help for hours. They would have to retrieve the keys themselves. When they all realized this, the girls instantly took a step back.
We can't do it. We're ladies,
Abby squealed while pinching her nose. So the boys played rock, paper, scissors to decide who had to do this nauseating task. Jeff won, and James had to find the keys. I definitely will not describe the details of poor James's experience. In the end, they retrieved the keys and cleaned them off with a yard hose. The smell would stick with James for the rest of his life. Since they had the 6 keys and the MTM, the kids wanted to go on an adventure. Wouldn't you? If you had the power to go into any book you wanted, wouldn't you want to try it out? The 4 teens sure did. The teens all wanted to try it out, but there was one problem. They couldn't decide on what book to use. Jeff wanted to use Robin Hood. James wanted to use a comic book. Abby wanted to use an advice book called Let's Talk, and Rosie thought they should go into Cinderella. They spent hours arguing over what book they should use. How would it even look inside an advice book? Not interesting, that's how, was Rosie's argument. Oh, and Cinderella would be interesting? It's a baby story, Abby challenged. I think we should use the machine for its intended purpose, going into fairy tales. I would prefer Robin Hood, but Cinderella would be okay too, Jeff pointed out.
You just want to do what Rosie says because you have a crush on her,
Abby screeched angrily. No way! I'm just pointing out that Rosie has an excellent book choice, Jeff screeched back. Guys, I'm telling you, Captain Tough Guy is the best choice for our first experience in the MTM, James put in. Hey James, can we get killed in a book? Jeff asked. Yeah, I forgot to mention that, James said, his face turning red. That's what I thought. So we should probably test it on a book that we can't get killed in, so the girls' choices are our only safe options. The girls then started arguing with each other about whose idea was best. Rosie's idea won out in the end because no one wanted to go into a boring old advice book. So they all went into the small outhouse and realized they didn't have the book. Oops, I didn't think of that, Rosie said after they all got their costumes on. But before the 4 had time to become downtrodden, Freddie came into the outhouse and inserted his own book. The 6-year-old then pressed the start button that had been left open. Then there was a swirling around the small room, and the 5 children were sucked out of our world. The next thing the kids knew was that they were face to face with Elmo of Sesame Street. Hello, Elmo loves you. I bet you can guess who said that. Ah! All of our favorite characters screamed. Why was Elmo here? More importantly, where was here? The 4 teens looked angrily at the 6-year-old that had accompanied them. Freddie, what book did you put in the machine? James asked. We're in Elmo's Day Out, Freddie said sheepishly. The teenagers groaned collectively. You're probably wondering what self-respecting 6-year-old would read Elmo's Day Out. Yeah, Freddie isn't too happy that his mother makes him read baby books, but Mother didn't want Freddie to read anything with romance, fighting, bad language, or bad people. Freddie had scarcely convinced his mom to let him read Elmo's Day Out. It was Freddie's favorite book since there was more than just rhymes in it, and when he heard his big brother talking about going into books, he wanted to visit Elmo and tell him how grateful he was for the book that saved Freddie from the horrors of Baby Blue Counts to 2. That is how all the teens and Freddie got to the world of Sesame Street. Elmo waited for the older kids to finish yelling at Freddie and then said, "When you fight, it makes Elmo sad." "Well, Abby no care what makes Elmo sad. Abby need to ask James how in the world we're going to get home," Abby said, turning her head towards James. I don't think you should encourage the baby talk, Abby," James said. Abby snarled. "Anyway, about getting home, it depends on how long Rosie set the timer for," James said, and everyone else turned to Rosie. "Yeah, about that. I thought we were going into Cinderella, and I set the timer for 1 hour. The other kids stood with their mouths open. An hour in Sesame Street? How horrible! I can guarantee that is what everyone but Freddie was thinking. "What are we gonna do?" Jeff asked unhappily. "We'll be here for an hour." "Elmo thinks that you should come shopping with him," Elmo said. The girls looked at Elmo with intrigue. "Shopping, did you say?" Abby queried enthusiastically. So the teenagers and Freddie went to the mall with Elmo. The girls looked for something more comfortable than their costumes, but all they found were dresses that looked like they were from the 80s. After shopping, Elmo took them to Hooper's store. If you, unlike me, didn't spend the early years of your childhood watching Sesame Street, I'll fill you in. Hooper's store is a store in Sesame Street where the monsters and Big Bird sometimes hang out. And no, I will not answer the question of who Big Bird is. His name is self-explanatory. At the store, the teens all asked for soda, but were refused that privilege, being told that it was too sweet for them, and that it might give them cavities. When Freddie told the guy running the store that they would all like milk, a cow walked in and gave it to them. As the hour came to an end, the teenagers rejoiced. No more Elmo! The hour finished, and the kids heard Rosie's recorded voice saying, "Your time is up, and you'll now be removed from the store you're in. Abby, stop playing with that!" Before the kids could comprehend what was going on, they felt the sucking feeling coming from the sky, and they were extracted from Elmo's Day Out. What a weird feeling it was to be extracted right out of a world. At home, the 5 children noticed that it was actually an hour later in their time from when they'd left. "I was expecting time not to change here, like in Narnia," Jeff said casually as he climbed out of the outhouse. "Me too. It was supposed to make it seem to our parents that we weren't gone for very long, but I guess I didn't hook that up right or something," James said in the form of an explanation. The girls nodded. "Well, I imagine it's about supper time. We should head home," Rosie reckoned. So they did. James walked them to his front gate, and then headed inside for a hot dog. Abby went to her mother's restaurant and had venison. Rosie went to her family car wash, and her dad took her to Fast Delivery Frank's. And Jeff had a lovely dinner on a TV tray. It was a satisfactory evening for all. The next day, Saturday, provided a chance for the young people we have come to love to go to James's house yet again. This time, to avoid confusion, Jeff brought over a collection of his fairy tale books. The list included titles such as Robin Hood, Snow White, Cinderella, Rumpelstiltskin, Jack and the Beanstalk, and Peter Pan. The rest of the kids brought over some fairy tales as well, like Thumbelina, Sleeping Beauty, Beauty and the Beast, The Three Little Pigs, The Princess and the Pea, and The Emperor's New Clothes. Oh yeah, James threw Captain Tough Guy into the pile as well. Also, Freddie hid Cat in the Hat in the heap. The quartet took the books into the MTM and set them in a stack next to the pile of costumes. This took them the equivalent of 5 minutes. After they had packed the books into the machine, they all sat on the lawn to hold the first meeting of the MTT. "As leader of the MTT, I now call this meeting to order," James said. They appointed James as the leader because he had come up with the idea for their science fair project. Jeff was commander of books and facts. Rosie was captain of mechanics, and Abby was in charge of club fashion. First, we have a report on the book status from Jeff. Jeff stood on cue and announced that they now had their books in order, and they would never again be tricked into going to Sesame Street. They all cheered merrily. Next was Rosie's mechanical report of how the machine was holding up extremely well, mostly because they had only used it once. "Abby is next with her report on the costume position," James said as Abby cleared her throat. "Ahem, I have an exciting announcement to make," Abby announced. "So make it," Freddie jeered. "As I was saying, I got us some new costumes so that we won't have to wear the same ones over again. I have cowboy outfits in case we go into a western. I found some pirate costumes for when we go into Peter Pan. And finally, I got a couple of accessories for the costumes we already have. So they put the new outfits and such into the costume pile. Then, of course, they all wanted to go into a story. I'll save you the trouble of reading the quarreling that went on after that and skip to what book they finally decided on. The name may sound familiar to you, either from earlier in this story or from reading the book yourself. The title they chose was Rumpelstiltskin. Now, the title of this chapter may confuse you. You probably thought it was about the machine coming together, but really it's about some people who come together. So the MTT went into the MTM, not Freddy, and inserted the book they had chosen. I must explain something to you fairy tale fanatics. When Abby had received this book for her birthday a couple years ago, she hadn't bothered to check why the book appeared to be twice as thick as it really was. The reason, reader, is that it was actually another story hidden under the cover of the book. You'll see why this story matters soon enough. The 4 teens crowded into the outhouse and put their original costumes on over their clothing. Jeff inserted the book and unlocked the glass box. He paused, for effect, and then hit the big red start button. Again came the swirling, and the 13-year-old children were again sucked out of the world. That very same day, Felix was locked in his room. The last time we saw Felix, he was riding to the castle with Stiltskin riding on a noble steed. We also knew that he was going to have a tough time explaining the situation he was in to his parents. Well, when he explained the position of Rumpelstiltskin to his parents, they locked him in his room with his crown tied to his head. Stiltskin was thrown in the dungeon for questioning later. Now Felix was sitting on his bed and being inspected by the royal wizard. Felix was being examined because his parents thought that the only way Felix would help such a vicious villain as Rumpelstiltskin would be because Felix was under a spell. Which isn't true at all. That's just what the king and queen thought. I believe you have a common spell set upon you, your highness. It is called the Do What I Want spell, the old wizard stated. Felix rolled his eyes. For the last time, Reggie, I don't have any sort of spell laid upon me. I was telling the truth when I told mother and father about Rumpelstiltskin being innocent. The wizard Reggie groaned. Your highness, I know Stiltskin personally. He is not a nice fellow. He also happens to be an expert on spell construction. It's entirely possible that you are being controlled by him right now. Felix rolled his eyes again. What an annoying fellow Reggie was. The wizard continued to inspect the prince. Soon the old man went away to tell the king and queen about the spell that had been placed on Felix. The prince tried to go out the window like he did when he was a young boy. He was too big. That, or the window had been shrunken, which in that world was entirely possible. That afternoon, Felix had to be let out of his room to take care of the unicorns. He went to the stable yard and turned. Felix realized that he was being followed by the 2 men who had taken him to the throne room the other day. Hey, you 2! Leave me alone! The unicorns can get skittish and gore people. How would you like to explain that to my father? The 2 men understood and left the royal to his unicorns. In the pen, Felix saw a bright flash of light right in front of him. What was that? He asked to no one in particular. Then 4 kids Felix's age stepped forth. Okay, so the book that the MTT put in the machine was thicker than it appeared. I explained that before. The second part of the book that was hidden was all about Felix, because the real Rumpelstiltskin story was explained by the queen earlier. So when the book opened to the second story, that is where the kids went. They arrived right as Felix was going into the unicorn pen. Now you see why I needed to explain that the book was thicker. So, you want to get lunch? Oh, right, the story. As the kids stepped out of our world and into the book of Rumpelstiltskin, they noticed a stable boy standing in front of them. Hey, Jeff, who is this in this story? Is this Rumpelstiltskin? Abby whispered, leaning into Jeff. I don't think this is Rumpelstiltskin, but let me ask. Jeff paused and turned to the stable boy, or who they thought was a stable boy. Do you happen to have the talent to spin straw into gold, sir? The other boy backed up uneasily. Who might you be? I'm Jeffrey Roberts, and these are my friends, James Kingston, Abby Gale, and Rosetta Stone. You're probably freaked out because we just appeared out of thin air and all, but don't worry, we won't hurt you, Jeff explained. The other kid's face held an expression that could have defined shock. Are you wizards? But no, you're too young. What about wizards' apprentices? Show me your wands and explain what spell you used to get here. I can have you imprisoned, so you better get speaking, the boy said in a sort of befuddled way. We aren't wizards. We didn't even know they existed. We're just 4 normal kids like you, Abby said confidently. The boy's mouth opened and he yelled out one word. Guards! The next thing the MTT knew was that they were being surrounded by giant, muscular men. Felix called for the guards after the 4 wizards in training had tried to explain who they were. The guardsmen came in hurriedly when they heard that their heir to the throne was calling for help. The 4 other children put up quite a fight, but the thing was, they only seemed to be able to fight with their mouths. The guards easily overpowered them. Felix was confused. Why hadn't they used magic? He told the guards to make the captives hand over anything that they had with them. The 4 put their hands into pockets on their garments and produced these items: an odd box from one of the boys, the one called James, a bottle of red paint that you put on your lips from one of the girls, a pair of tinted spectacles from the other girl, and a small stuffed bear from the other boy. "What are these items? Show me how they work," Felix asked commandingly. The one called James stepped forward and picked up his box. "You turn it on by flipping the switch." Everyone from Rumpelstiltskin's world gasped as the box showed little men trapped inside, beating up other little men. "Then to play, you just have to move this guy to kill off the other ones." Felix was horrified. "Why do you kill the other men?" It's part of the game, dude." Then Felix and James had a long discussion about why is it a game to kill people. In the end, Felix got a headache and Abby was asked to show what her potion of red paint did. "It's makeup. What else there's there to know?" The girl shrugged. Felix nodded in understanding. His mother sometimes wore stuff such as that. Then the girl with the tinted spectacles. "These are sunglasses. They keep you from hurting your eyes on a sunny day, although I can't really wear them over my normal glasses." Felix tested them out. This was a marvelous invention. Finally, the boy with the stuffed bear. "This is my teddy bear. I like to take him with me because I get scared sometimes and he comforts me." Jeffrey's face turned red with embarrassment. Felix nodded. "They have no magic on them. You may release them." After this other kid, who was definitely more important than a stable boy, made them show him all the stuff in their pockets, the MTT was released. Abby leaned towards Jeff and asked how long the timer had been set for. "I set it for 2 hours, Jeff replied casually. Abby nodded. "Let's hope it's more worthwhile than Sesame Street." The other boy, whose name they learned was Felix, told them to stop whispering. So Felix led the procession to the throne room to show the king, queen, and Reggie the wizard what had been found in the stables. The MTT was pushed along behind Felix, and the guards were the pushers behind them. Felix, right? I was wondering why you're so important. Are you like a knight protecting the new prince or princess?" Jeff questioned. "What new prince or princess? I'm the only prince there is." Jeff was confused. The Rumpelstiltskin story didn't say anything about an older prince. Felix stared at Jeff. "What new prince or princess?" I thought that there was a new baby around. You know, the one Rumpelstiltskin wants." Felix looked even more confused. "I was that baby. What are you talking about?" Jeff started to talk, but then stopped. He'd figure it out later. When they arrived at the throne room, the guards opened the massive double doors. Inside, the king and queen sat upon high golden thrones. "Who have you brought to us, Felix?" the queen asked lovingly. "These 4 appeared in the stables while I was feeding and grooming the unicorns," Felix said. Rosie tried to suppress a giggle. It just didn't sound right for a boy at this age to be saying unicorn. "You think something is amusing? The fact that you trespassed into the royal stables is not something I'd find humorous," the king roared. Quickly, Rosie stopped giggling. "Sorry, your majesty, nothing is funny, not at all." "You speak when spoken to, no other time." Rosie hastily decided that this was not the best time to point out that the king had indeed spoken to her. Felix's parents discussed something with Reggie and quickly declared that the children should undergo a whole magical checkup to see if they had any invisible wands or stray spells lingering at their fingertips. Reggie came over to them and asked them to float. The teens stared at the strange old man in disbelief. "We can't float. We can't do any magic at all," Jeff spoke up. "We built a device that allows us to go into different worlds than ours, and we came into yours." Jeff would have said more, but the wizard Reggie cut them off. "What kind of device? Is it a magical item or something more under the study of science?" "Definitely more scientific. It's for a school project," James replied. Reggie looked intrigued. "And what is its power source?" "It uses solar power, and that means it runs on the sun's rays," Rosie answered. Reggie would have continued, but the king interrupted. "So do they have any magic or not? I don't pay you to talk to people, Reginald." Reggie went up to the king. I'm sorry to contradict you, your highness, but I got them to talk long enough for me to test if they have magic. It's a very complex deception. When a wizard is distracted, they don't seem to suspect if their magic is being tested and can't stop my scanning. The king rolled his eyes. So do they have magic on them or what? Reggie slid his glasses into place, but they fell right back down. They have not a speck of magic anywhere upon them. The king looked satisfied for once. Good. So now the question is, why did you 4 children go trespassing in my unicorn pens? Rosie giggled again. It was so funny to see a grown man say unicorn.
It was purely an accident, and we are terribly sorry if we upset the unicorns,
Abby said diplomatically. And that is how things came together.